Hello, my name's Ben.
And my name's Josh.
Welcome back to FPL graduates and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be revealing our teams ahead of Game Week 4. Of course, an international break has gone by, so there is potential for us to make some changes in our teams. Without further ado, let's get straight into it and look to Josh's team.
Okay, then. So, yeah, into my team for Game Week 4. The wild card is active. It was the plan all pre-season, so we're going ahead with it. Despite a pretty decent opening 3 weeks, obviously, went Haaland over Salah, and it did pay off in terms of the captaincy, which I was hoping it to do. So, going into this week, obviously, the plan is to bring in Mo Salah for this Burnley away and Everton at home fixture. And then I'll talk about the transfer plans a little bit longer term after that, a little bit later on. In goal, we've got David Raya. Definitely want a piece of this Arsenal defence. Zero big chances conceded so far this season, which is fantastic from an Arsenal point of view, considering the opposition they've faced as well. I mentioned it, I think, in all three of the videos this week, so I'm pretty big on the Arsenal defence this week. Raya is just the cheapest entry point into that team. I did have Sanchez and Timber or Gabriel, but I've gone for the cheaper route in Tosin and Raya. I think Tosin's minutes is fairly secure given the injury to Levi Colwill. Maybe the odd hint of a UCL rotation here and there, but if it happens, it happens. I'm not too bothered with him. Defcon wise, he's fairly solid as well. Obviously, just mopping up at the back, which is what we like to see with Brentford away this week. Van Dijk's the Liverpool defender of choice. Burnley away this week. Obviously, he eats Defcon for breakfast as well. Slight little theme here in the back three. And then Chris Richards as well. Obviously, again, loads of Defcon so far this season. Sunderland at home this week. Should be an interesting one because Sunderland have been pretty good going forwards so far this season. It'll be interesting whether they can sort of keep that up or not. In terms of the bench options, we've got Senesi, again, good for Defcons, who rotates quite nicely with Richards. The plan is to probably play Tosin and Van Dijk most weeks, to be honest. And then we've got Joe Rodon there as well. He's flagged at the minute. I haven't really heard an update too much on his sort of fitness, so we'll have to wait until Friday, probably the day that you're seeing this, to sort of get an update on him. If it's not him, it'll probably be someone like Ekdal or another 4 mil defender who's fairly good for Defcon. So what's the thoughts on that defence, Ben?
Yeah, fairly solid defence there to start things off and to kick things off. And of course, having that backup and having sort of those options off the bench is going to be really important, especially if you're rotating Tosin and Richards around in your team. Of course, I think Van Dijk will be a solid option, especially with Defcon. He's so far out in front, it's ridiculous in terms of Defcon contributions. And yeah, I do think it's going to be very sensible to have that Arsenal coverage going into the longer term, especially. Definitely a move I'm looking at this week on a non-wild card is how I can facilitate bringing in that Arsenal defender. So yeah, all in all, it's a fairly solid start to it. Of course, like Tosin maybe sort of being the sort of different sort of option to go for. But yeah, you sort of have covered those, three defenses, Arsenal, Chelsea and Liverpool, that I expect to do the potentially the best over the longer term anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And then onto the midfield. Then we'll start off with Mo Salah. Obviously, he's got the armband, as I mentioned. Just can't go without him for Burnley away. It's like playing suicide. There's no chance I'm going to be doing that this week. I have kept Cody Gakpo. I've had him since game week 1. I just think minutes wise for over the next couple of weeks, I feel like he is fairly secure. A lot of people are saying that Ekatike and Isak can play out wide. They've played like out wide between them less than 10 times in their career. So I'm going to be sort of waiting and seeing to see how that sort of shapes up if they do play together. I think it's definitely going to be more of a case of 70 minutes sort of substitutions between those two guys. I don't think Gakpo is going to be absolutely nailed for the rest of the season, but for the short term, over the next 2 weeks in particular, I'm more than happy to keep hold of Cody Gakpo, especially in the form that he's been in. Antoine Semenyo's in there, obviously someone who I can hop on, who I already have hopped on in terms of the price rises that he's had so far this season. Brighton at home this week is a fairly decent fixture. It's actually got a lot of goals in it in their historical results, so hopefully he can be a part of that this weekend. And then Lucas Paqueta rounds it off. Tottenham at home this week. Probably not the most ideal fixture wise for him, but we mentioned it in the Game Week Guide video when discussing SAR replacements. Just a good asset over a long period of time that I can play most weeks. got a lot of different routes to points with the penalties, the defcons, and then obviously his open play threat. I was very impressed by West Ham when they did switch that four back against Forest. So I'm just hoping we see that West Ham and not the West Ham of Game Week 1 and Game Week 2 so far this season. So yeah, what's the thoughts on that midfield, man?
Yeah, fairly solid midfield, and look, you can look at potentially transferring Cody Gakpo over the next few weeks if we see any sort of hints of rotation, etc. But I think for now it's going to be fairly sort of set in stone that he's got that left spot locked down, which is really encouraging to see, because of course pre-season we didn't know how long he would be sort of around for as an FPL asset. Salah, of course, got to be in there, and same could be said for Semenyo. I think he's really sort of started the season very well. And Paqueta, of course, you'll rotate him in and out with Anderson, I imagine, for some weeks. And the only sort of thing I would say is potentially makes that sort of eighth spot like a little bit weaker. But again, you've got to spread those funds about. And I think Paqueta just does provide decent value at the price point that he's at. So yeah, don't mind it at all.
On to the front line then, we've got Victor Gyökeres up first. I wanted to get some Arsenal coverage like the defence, but in attack, he's probably on penalties, we think. Obviously, we haven't seen him take one with Saka on the pitch, but Saka is out for a little while anyway, so for the foreseeable, he should be on penalties. He's obviously leading the line for this Arsenal attack that haven't been too great from open play so far this season, so I expect that to improve over the coming weeks. They had some tough fixtures, to be fair to them, over the opening three, barring that Leeds game where they did score a lot of goals. So, yeah, looking forward to this Forest at home fixture. Obviously, Forest defensively last season been really good. I've been quite disappointed with them this season, even under Nuno defensively. They've just seemed to leak just goals that you wouldn't expect Forest to concede. So, yeah, under Ange, it's going to be an interesting one. Are we going to see new manager bounce, or are the players going to be absolutely raging that Nuno's been sort of kicked out the door? We'll have to wait and see on that one. João Pedro comes in for me. I was obviously very cold on him in pre-season, but with Liam Delap obviously being injured, his minutes definitely increase. And obviously, yeah, he's been in fantastic form, albeit scoring his goals from set pieces. And then Jean-Philippe Mateta, Sunderland at home. Two really nice fixtures in the next two. And then, as I mentioned at the start of my team, the plan probably will be come game week 6 to do a little switch and do Salah and Mateta to Haaland, and then a midfielder like Bruno Fernandes. I've got the funds to be able to do that. So, yeah, that'll be the sort of the short-term transfer plans. Obviously, that is if Cody Gakpo sort of stays in the team. I do have one free transfer extra coming out of this week, so I didn't use it last week. So, yeah, looking fairly set on the wild card. What's the thoughts on the forward line, Ben?
Yeah, looks like a fairly strong and solid forward line. And look, you spread the funds around the team in this one, which means the one premium, which makes sense why you're sort of looking at those potential transfer plans and hopping around the premiums a little bit more. Of course, Gyökeres has had a tough start to life at Arsenal, but it has been tough fixtures as well. So we've seen glimpses against sort of the lower opposition. So I do think there's potential there for him to do really well in that team. And then João Pedro, similarly, I think you got burnt, last season by Salah. I don't think you made the mistake here with João Pedro, and you've brought him in. So that's good to see. And then, like I said, Mateta is a really good short-term pick. So don't mind that at all as a front three and as an overall team. Okay, so moving on into my team, and we have got free transfers. So we've got a couple of free transfers that we could potentially make, which is good. So to start off in goal, we've got Sanchez. Yeah, fairly happy with him. Obviously, got very lucky last game week to keep that clean sheet against Fulham. But we'll have to just see and look for the longer term. I'm happy to hold him as my Chelsea coverage. In the defence, I'm not too happy with having a double up on Spurs defence with West Ham away. So there is a thought to make a potential defensive transfer and try and bring in one of those Arsenal assets. I'm looking at potentially Murillo to make that move, to then put him to put an Arsenal defender into the starting 11. I've got enough money in the bank to go with whichever defender I want, so I could go with Gabriel for safety, which seems to be the most sensible move because, of course, Arsenal have so many defenders nowadays, even with Saliba out injured. So yeah, as it currently stands, it's Porro, Richards, Van der Ven. That could very well be someone in replacement of Van der Ven come the game week deadline. Richards in there as well. I think Palace will start the season really, really well, and I don't see that sort of stopping any anytime soon, at least from a defensive perspective. Anyway, Josh, what's the thoughts on the defence? And there's a potential transfer plan forming there.
Yeah, I really like it. Obviously, Porro, not just the clean sheet wise, but his attacking threat's been pretty decent so far this season. Richards is a solid pick at 4.5, and I like the idea of bringing in that Arsenal coverage. I think it's the smart play with Forest at home this week. Yeah, the fixtures aren't great in the next couple after that, but you're bringing him early before people are going to start jumping on him in terms of that game week 7 sort of fixture turn for Arsenal. So, yeah, really like the idea behind that move. And obviously, you're covering off, two out of the three defences, I would say. Obviously, barring Liverpool, who defensively haven't been great so far this season. So I think it's a solid back line for sure.
Okay, so moving on into the midfield, and to start with, we are persisting with some of these maybe underperforming midfielders. Talking about Florian Wirtz, who's had a really tough couple of fixtures, to be honest, and the actual sort of, when you look at the game week 1 stats, pretty decent in terms of the goal involvement. It was at just about 0.5, so not too bad at all. Looked good over the international break, at least for that second fixture for Germany, scoring a goal, creating 3 chances, lots of sort of got fouled a few times. It was a pretty decent performance. So hoping that the fixture against Burnley is going to show what a player Florian Wirtz is. Also got Bruno Fernandes in there, of course, transferred him in last week and captained. Fantastic outcome from that, with the penalty in the final sort of minute. So yeah, fairly happy with him as well for the long term, because his attacking output and stats look really good no matter what position he is playing. Salah on the captaincy, and there's thoughts to potentially triple captain Salah this week. I'll need to have a look into it a bit deeper in terms of when else I might use that triple captaincy in the first half of the season. But this seems like a pretty good opportunity to get that out the way, and focus on some of those other chips that I've got to play. And then, yeah, we sort of finish off the midfield with Reinders and Morgan Rogers. Reinders, of course, has been a sort of pretty good game week 1, and then nothing since. I do think he's still a good option, but he's only a good option in the system that Pep wants to play, that provides him playing almost like a number 10. So we're not going to see that against every opponent. And I do think against Manchester United, that's one of those games where we could see him play in a more advanced role. So I'm excited to see how that plays out, because Pep maybe sort of might want a bit more defensive stability with maybe not having the wing back so far forward. So I think Reinders could, that game could suit him quite well. And then Morgan Rogers with the fixtures, hasn't looked too great to start the season, but hoping that Villa can turn around that form. They brought in a few good players towards the end of the window and on deadline day, so hoping they can really sort of turn things around. Josh, what's the thoughts there on the midfield?
Yeah, really solid. I think a lot of good picks in there that, people are maybe turning off at the moment on someone like Florian Wirtz and Rogers, but for me, they're still fantastic picks going forwards, especially Wirtz. I really like him going into this week. The fixture suits him a lot better than the ones that he's had so far. A lot of people taken a lot from these early fixtures with Arsenal and Liverpool assets, but both sides have had very, very tricky fixtures in the opening 3. So yeah, for me, I wouldn't be too worried about him. And yeah, Burnley away and Everton at home, the next two fixtures that I think he will return in. Bruno Fernandes is fantastic. I'm sad to see him go on my wild card, but he'll be back sooner rather than later. I think he's a fantastic hold over these next two. City away and Chelsea at home. City defensively have not been great, so there's always a bonus there. United look quite dangerous in terms of winning penalties. Against Burnley, there was like 3 or 4 opportunities. I think one got overturned. They obviously got one. There's a couple of others that were like 50-50 calls. So, yeah, there's a reason why everyone has him, because he's just always on the pitch, always getting DEFCONs. So yeah, really like him. Salah triple captain, I really like. If I weren't wildcarding, I think I probably would play it. Just positionally, where Burnley are conceding their goals tends to be down that right-hand side, so I'd expect Salah to take advantage of that. Obviously, we haven't seen as much goal threat from him so far this season, only the 1 goal so far against Bournemouth in the sort of dying embers of that game, but I expect it to obviously increase with the easier fixtures on the horizon for Liverpool. Reinders is an interesting one. I do agree with what you're saying. He should probably play further forward against United. It'll be interesting to see how he does. Obviously, very low data points for him so far this season. Even in the Wolves game, a haul out of nowhere really when you look at the data. So one to monitor. I think there are probably better options around his price point. And then Morgan Rogers, as I mentioned when talking about Burt, I think he's a fine hold for at least 4 weeks. They've got very, very good fixtures, Villa. And the signings of Elliott and Sancho will only help Rogers take that sort of creative burden off of him, because I feel like he's being looked at as like the only sort of creative outlet in that team at the moment. So, yeah, it should hopefully help him out in terms of not having that burden on his back.
Okay, so moving on to the strike force, and João Pedro has been a really good asset for me to own so far this season, and he will keep his place for the foreseeable, especially, now Delap's out injured, and the minute security is most definitely there, albeit we don't think he's on penalties, but that doesn't lessen the appeal really for him. He's looked really good so far for Chelsea. Ollie Watkins rounds off the team, and again, the stats wise, it hasn't looked the worst for Ollie Watkins, but the outcome has looked terrible for them. So I'm excited to see how they get on over the next few game weeks. It could be one where I move to Gyökeres or even to Alexander Isak over the next few weeks and start planning towards that move in a few weeks' time. So that's one we'll have to wait and see. And then, of course, on the bench, Dubravka, Murillo, who could then become an Arsenal defender this week. Gui, who, since he's made his move back to Chelsea, that's put a little bit of a spanner in the works, and we'll have to work out what we do with that going forwards. Because, of course, like I said, I'm going to plan on doing a fairly late wild card anyway, around that sort of point where we're looking towards AFCON, etc. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. And then Esteve rounds off the team. So, Josh, that's the front line and the overall team. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely agree with the sentiments on Watkins. He's had the chances, just not really took them so far. But we've seen that with Ollie Watkins every single season that he's been in the Premier League. He's not necessarily the most clinical, but he just tends to get a lot of the chances. So yeah, I'd expect it similar to the Rodgers, both of them to come back into form over these next 4 weeks. João Pedro, we mentioned a couple of times. I think he's a great asset, probably the best forward to own, just sheerly due to ownership as well. If you don't own him, it's a bit squeaky bum time in terms of the rank drops that you could be facing. Okay, then, so game week 4 team reveals are up. We've finally got the Premier League back. That international break felt like it went on forever. I'm very glad that it's over.
Yeah, absolutely. We are so glad that FPL is back, at least for another couple of weeks. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe as usual. I've been Ben,
I've been Josh.
and we'll see you guys
Next time. Have a good game week, everyone.